Again, my name is Franklin Fogleman. I'm a producer from Marion, Arkansas, and I'm here to talk about the best way to produce high-yielding soybeans. I heard somebody ask about them being profitable soybeans. That wasn't necessarily part of the talk in this time, but high-yielding is what we're after. A little bit about myself. I'm a fourth-generation farmer, and we're a typical family farm. I farm with my father and my two uncles. We raise rice, soybeans, corn, wheat, and milo on the farm. I am a graduate of the University of Arkansas, but I didn't major in agriculture. I majored in finance, which may be something that gives me a little bit of a hand as we go through this trying economic time in agriculture. And I'm married and have two children. In 2001, our farm was under a bit of a dark cloud. Things weren't very good in agriculture, and we were struggling and really didn't know what to do. Times were lean. Our focus was on cotton production, and the cotton production was good, but the losses were mounting and the farm was not profitable. And as we dug in and we tried to figure out what we needed to do, why were we not profitable, we realized the vast majority of our losses were coming out of our soybean production. At that time, we treated soybeans like a stepchild crop. They got taken care of after everything else we did. We were more worried about planting cotton, fertilizing cotton, spraying cotton, plowing cotton. The little bit of milo we had, we were worried about taking care of it. And say maybe at the same time we're pulling rice levies and trying to flush rice. They just never got the attention. And at the time we were so successful, we were probably averaging about 24 bushels per acre. Didn't work then, still won't work now. So we knew that something had to change, that something had to break, but the change wouldn't come overnight. We were stuck in this vicious cycle of repetition of just doing the same thing over and over and over, hoping for a different result, and we couldn't find it. I will have to admit, though, those in some ways, although they weren't profitable, were the good old days. I'd give anything to plant 60 pounds. That was back in the day when we planted pound. Got a 50-pound bag, planted 60 pounds, sprayed a quart of Roundup twice over the top, and there was plenty of time to coach baseball teams and go to the lake on the weekend. In fact, I see a man in the room. I suspect my uncle probably coached. Did he coach your son in baseball? Coached about every kid ever came to Marion in baseball too, and there was time for it back then. And there's part of me that wishes it was still like that now. But we started to look at over a period of about 14 years. It didn't all happen at once. But what all did we intermittently decide needed to change? First thing was our focus, the attention that we wanted to give to crop, as we want to turn it into a profit center. Second thing was the equipment that we were using. At the time, we were drilling beans as opposed to planting beans. Our planting date, which we often found ourselves to be easily in the second half of June or the first couple of days of July, or as I like to have heard it referred to, about June 35th. We were commonly out planting beans at that time. Our variety selection, the process that we went through to make it. Our irrigation practices and techniques that we used at that time. Our fertility and our rotations, because we were awfully bad about just raising bean on bean on bean on background. Our seed traits, which obviously came into play not anytime near 2001, but has come into play more recently. And as Clay and I were just discussing, will become a bigger part of the equation in the near future. And then in the latter part of it, data came onto it. Where do we get information? What do we do with our own information? And what do we use to make decisions with it? So when I started with focus, we had to become more cognizant of where we got information from. We didn't want beans to be a stepchild anymore. They needed to be a profit center. We come to realize one of the biggest factors in us making a profit is instead of working that ground in the spring after we attended to everything else in planting late, we had to get out of that cycle and get into working the ground earlier and working it in the fall or no-tilling it so we could get out more quickly and plant. And we had to shift our focus from, and I've heard this time and time again today, so I think as an industry is something we need to work more on. We had a cost per acre mentality on managing our cost structure on our beans, and we had to shift that to a cost per unit of production. It didn't necessarily mean the mindset that an expense was bad. It needed to have economic return, and it needed to lower the cost per bushel, production cost for each individual bushel. Therefore, the difference between it and your sales price hopefully is going to be your profit. The second thing was our equipment. At that time, we were planting with a 750 drill. And if anybody in this room uses one, I certainly hope you don't take offense to it. But when I was searching for pictures yesterday on the internet, I found the word expired stamped on one. I didn't do that. And it was so fitting for the way we operated in our piece of equipment. It was a worn out piece of junk. It didn't plant anywhere close to the seeding rate we wanted it to do. We just set it and let it run because it was a stepchild crop. So that was an opportunity for huge improvement on our part. Better equipment and do a better job shifting from drilling beans to planting beans. Our first move was into Great Plains equipment. We tried everything they had. Twin row 30s didn't work for us. We tried 40-foot planter on 10-inch centers. Didn't really work for us. It was too heavy. It was a pretty good planter, but on our very heavy soils we have on part of the farm, it was just a boondoggle that we're always having to mess with. So our final shift was back to John Deere equipment. And it came from a Monsanto rep who said something to me one day about he had some very good soybean producers and they planted beans, not drilled them. And it took me a while to understand that. We realized our best planting piece of equipment at that time was the old vacuum planter we used to plant cotton. It planted exactly what we wanted it to plant, put the seed exactly where we wanted it put, and space it out exactly the way we wanted it done. So we began to shift over the next couple of years into equipment, and we still find ourselves planting with the old cotton planter. It's still on the farm, and we still use it. Despite all the information that says they shouldn't be on 38-inch middles, we find a way still to make it work for us. We've brought twin row into the picture. We've tried twin row with various spacings. We've settled on the John Deere 1720 twin row. And we liked it because the two twins were more narrow. They were tighter. And we had a lot of trouble slipping off the side of beds. We weren't getting a very good stand as a result. So when we went to that planter, I think it's 2.5 inches more narrow. That brought us up for dry feed a little bit better when we're irrigating, but gave us a much better chance to stay on top of our bed. We still have a whole lot of unimproved dry land ground on the farm, and we've settled on the 1795 John Deere planter for it, planting on 15-inch centers. It gives us an opportunity to canopy. We're in an area with very bad pigweed, but it gives us a tool where we're planting beans and we're getting what we want from a planting standpoint, but still have a greater chance for trying to canopy too. The next point of change was planting date. Again, we were very late, so how could we get planted sooner? What is too early? And everyone knows that planting date impacts yield. We've heard it forever, we all know it, but nobody had ever found a way to quantify it. What does it really mean to me? I know that we were going to make a higher yield, but how much more? And how can we take that information if somebody could tell us how much more and do something about it? I ran across this chart about 5 years ago on the farm. It was something we were looking at. We were looking at irrigation methods at that time. And it was easy to see. The left-hand side of the chart showed higher yields than the right-hand side of the chart. And that was kind of the beginning stage of my thought process of how to put it all together. In came not this exact chart, but something similar to it. I took that year's yields and I charted them in a scatter chart. Every field with the planting date and the yield. And then it drew a trend line, and it created exactly what we all expected. Decreasing yield, a yield response tied to planting date. So there we had it. We started to see it. I followed that with multiplying 2 or 3 years worth of data together in one chart. And we obviously wasn't this chart. I couldn't find the exact one. But we realized we were planting each year. We were basically planting in 3 increments: early, middle, and late. And it doesn't matter where they are. It just always seemed to slide up and down the scale that way. Well, this is, I think, 3 years worth of planting information combined into one, so they're not as defined. But we had our first way. We could quantify what having additional planting capacity would do for us. If we had an extra planter, we could take the third batch of planting dates. We could move half of them into the first area, the first batch of planting dates in higher yields, and the second half from that later group into what became the middle group. And we used that information to quantify it. All we did was use that line that Excel drew for me to say how many additional beans would we be able to plant if we moved all these acres forward into 2 batches. Quickly realized that we could more than easily pay for an extra planter 1 year. That's all it took. Decision was over with. We went and bought another planter, and it worked for us this year. We didn't have all those late planting dates, and we got a yield response from doing it. Now, I hope there aren't any retailers in the room, and Dr. Ross, you'll have to excuse me just a little bit. I don't mean to step on any toes, but here's the unfortunate truth. Our variety selection was not the greatest system in the world. Our variety selection process went from getting several pages of information from the university. My uncle would sit around the table, he'd come through it for 2 or 3 days, and at the end he had a whole bunch of stuff circled and highlighted and marked, but still didn't have concrete decisions. So we had to put the information up. Our second point of influence was the retailers. And again, if there's any in the room, I'm sorry, but I'm really going to step on their toes hard. I began to realize that friends of mine who are retailers may get a trip to a carnival if they sold X number of bags of a certain variety. Well, the truth is I wasn't so sure if they were trying to sell the bags of seed to us so they could go to the carnival or if it was what was for best for me. We came to the realization we'd rather have the best variety and make a great crop and go to the carnival ourselves and leave the retailer at home. So we really started to become cognizant of where we took our influence and our information from on buying seed. Everybody had won a trial, everybody had done this. You just had to scrape it all away and make the best decision you could. So we ultimately settled on only what happens on our farm, and that's it. That's the only place. I had been the guy that despised variety trials on the farm. I couldn't stand them. We brought them back because it was in an environment that we had some degree of control over, and we knew that the information was best for us. We backed that up with doing the same thing every year. Like several farm operations I've heard mentioned today, they're recording everything they do, whether it's a seed that they plant, a gallon of chemical that they spray, or something that they harvest. They record it at the point in the field that is actually done. We're doing the same thing. This has afforded us the opportunity to see exactly what every variety makes over the exact number of acres on the farm without relying on a bunch of people to keep up with it. Equipment is keeping up with it. So we feel like we're getting much more factual information for us on the farm that we can use to make the decisions on our own. And you can see, we try some varieties in large acres and they work, and then we'll bring in some smaller quantity acres and try a variety, and if it works on the farm, then its base will grow the following year. If it doesn't, it's out and it's going to be replaced by something else. Irrigation practices. This one really surprised me. We picked up on this about 3 or 4 years ago. I can't tell you why, but our mindset was go plant under pivots first, plant furrow irrigated ground second. When we began to chart several years worth of yield data on a field by field basis, combined with the irrigation practice, whatever type it happened to be, we created these 4 different trend lines. Well, the down and sharply decreasing lines obviously show you that those irrigation practices have a far greater response to early versus later planting dates, and it surprised me. The center pivot is the line that's not perfectly flat, but is more flat. So that told us we had less of a response on pivot irrigated ground than we did on furrow irrigated ground. I'm not an agronomist enough to even give a clue why it is, but it was a fact that we uncovered it. So it shifted our management mentality. Instead of rushing out to plant the pivot irrigated ground first, we would make an effort to plant the furrow irrigated ground at the pivot ground weight because it wasn't going to have as big of an impact on us. Fertility and rotation. We were called in a position of doing very little to no fertility and very little to no rotation. I'm not here to engage anybody in an argument whether they're a Varus person or a grid sample or whatever you want to do. We were doing grid samples, and we went to doing variable rate applications, 1, to make it affordable, but 2, to put out exactly what we needed where we needed it. We combined that with rotations because as we got to looking at them, we were finding that we were getting some pretty big responses to beans on various crops. So this is over about 3 years worth of information. Corn was +8, milo was +7, planting in wheat straw, which was a total shift of mentality that requires an outright argument every June on our farm. I mean, to the point we're going to come to blows over whether we're going to burn wheat fields or not. We've learned that we were picking up 9 bushels of beans and a much easier day on the farm by not burning all of our wheat fields. So we tried to move away from it. And we found we were picking up about 6 bushels following rice too. We raise a lot of rice in our farm. So we started making a far more conscientious effort to rotate the beans with other crops. And of course we got the added benefit of herbicide rotation too that came from it. Seed traits. We're raising both Roundup and Liberty Link beans on our farm, and our mentality for years has been to plant the Liberty Link beans first and the Roundup beans second. I can't tell you why it was that way. Actually, I think it goes back to the synthetic thing is predominantly where it winds up going back to. But we started looking at it in 2014 and just comparing both of them over several thousand acres. And at that time, we found that our Liberty was beating our Roundup by just under, our Roundup was beating our Liberty by just under 5 bushels to the acre. In 15, I'm sorry, I don't have the chart, but in between 14 and 15, I looked at both of them by themselves on the planting date trend chart with 2 years worth of data, and I found that Liberty beans did show a response to the planting date, but it wasn't near the decline that the Roundup beans were. They dropped off more quickly and had a greater response to a later planting date than the Liberty beans did. It shifted our mentality. We went from planting Liberty first to focus on planting Roundup first, and the end result was we wound up showing in excess of a 9 bushel difference between the two of them. So you immediately say, well, why do you still plant Liberty beans? We have a tremendous pigweed problem on our farm. So yield opportunity or not, we still have weeds that we have to control, and Liberty beans are still going to wind up being an important tool for us on the farm. Data. None of this, all those squiggly lines and straight lines and dots and scatter points and things like that, none of that would have been possible without good information. We didn't use other people's information, we used our own. We were in position to know the confidence of the quality of the data, and had we not been doing it and gathering all this stuff, we wouldn't have been able to make the decisions that we made that have lent us the opportunity to make higher and better soybean yields. In closing, several of you in the room know me, and you already know that what we're doing is not genius. Anybody can do it. You're here today because you are a student of your profession, and we think that that's made the biggest difference for us is just digging into what we're doing, trying to do a better job, studying techniques that work for us, don't work for us, work for other people, and trying to do a better job. And then lastly, I was thinking about, well, how do you know when you get there? We have moved the ball a long way. We've moved from a low yield, a very insignificant number of acres, to a higher yield, much higher yield, on a far more substantial number of acres. Now, I'm not a 100 bushel guy or anything like that. We're doing it on a little more than 5 acres. But we've moved the ball. And the more I thought about it, I realized you'll never get there. We're not there. We haven't perfected it. We'll change some of this stuff again. It's meant to change. But the entire concept of it is just to simply be studying what you're doing and finding what you think gives you the best system, the best antics to help you make the highest yield possible. And that's all I have. I appreciate your attention, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. Thank you.